So, we've got one box here. I guess before we start that, let's see, I got a Wii game, Pandora's Tower, which is probably one of the last game, the end of life games for the Wii, major ones to come out, I think. The basic premise is you have a kind of time limit, you have a, well actually I don't know how much you're supposed to know, so let's just say that's there. And everything else is anime, although those are going to be treated differently, so let's just dive into the guts of this box. I think there's only two things in here. It's an awfully big box for that, but works out, right? In this case, we got Hakuoki, The Memory of Snowflowers, and Naruto Shippuden, set 14. And while I stare off into the distance, looking for the Naruto DVD in the pile over there, which I keep not seeing for some reason. Yeah, still don't see it. I see Zatch Bell, Tower Stone, Toriko, Pokemon Black and White, blah 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 blah. Well, okay, I already know that I'm somewhere in the 160s, so 167 suggests we're in the right place. And Hakuoki, I think this is an OVA, it's 6 episodes. And I guess I can, well, double check real fast, because I didn't think I was at 166. But I could be mistaken. And I actually have a really quick way to test. Down here, and okay, 166. And according to this, season ends at 175, so this starts a new story arc after that. Interesting to know. Okay, now I just have to figure out all this stuff. I did think there was more than this that was scheduled to arrive, but I don't know. I think a couple of publishers have maybe been having a little trouble. Sentai seems to have some delayed titles, which is worrisome because it's the same sort of stuff ADV did near the end of their life. Let's very quickly cover some titles I'm not going to keep on camera very long because they are hentai. We got re-release of Bondage 101 and Rxxx with fairly risque covers, and that's why we're just mentioning them. So let's go to other DVDs that arrived. We've got Night Warriors, a Darkstalkers anime, 4 episodes, 2 DVDs, nice and all aged. Odin, Photon Space Sailor Starlight, Tokyo Pig, which I think is movie versions of some of the contents. But no, it's still an anime. And Ultimate Muscle, one of the sillier looking things to come in a while, I think. One that I would not guess was anime, but apparently is. And I guess there's a good way to do this. And then we got an NIS release that arrived earlier this week, Hanasaku Iroha, Blossoms for Tomorrow. So, like your stereotypical NIS release, it comes with a book, 2 cases. This is a DVD Blu-ray release, so you got your Blu-ray disc and your DVD disc, your advertisement for other stuff. Most of these I haven't gotten yet because I pre-ordered Princess and the Pilot. I will pre-order the Everyday Tales of the Cat God. And of course this has the Blu-ray and the DVD. For some reason this Blu-ray doesn't want to stay in its slot. So I guess I won't mess with it too much. And then of course your stereotypical NIS book with characters, information, art. Overall, you know, you're pretty stereotypical, pretty neat. NIS release. And we order these just right, and then we can go. There's my anime for the week, which is actually okay haul. Especially when you throw on, I did buy a replacement for a DVD that wasn't ripping, blah, 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 blah. Let's go over here, talk about the interesting thoughts I've had watching anime this week. So, first off, as I hinted at last week, I was really excited to watch a certain scientific railgun, and I watched it. I did push watching the first half of that a little hard, and kind of had a strange nightmare mixing Evangelion with Railgun, and then some third disturbing thing that I don't know how to summarize real quickly, but, you know, other than that, watching Railgun itself is actually very entertaining. And I talked about this with somebody from the DVD collection chat room who used to be one of my YouTube subscribers, and it sounded like part of the reason I probably enjoyed it is it was in line with my expectations and not quite as in line with his. Whereas he was probably hoping for something with more superpowers to it. Maybe something sort of like Scryed or something like that. But I was kind of expecting I want to see these characters more, and so School Life anime, which Railgun is a lot more like, was pretty much it. There's supernatural or Esper elements kind of woven into it, but and of course the overall stories are Esper related as they develop, but overall it does play pretty strongly to these are characters and these are how they relate to each other in this school environment sort of way, and it was pretty entertaining doing that. I thought it did some interesting things. Others I'm not exactly sure what it is, but normally I really don't like the pushy characters like Teleporting Girl is, but I think they managed to keep her fairly fresh in this one, so she was actually pretty fun to watch. And Misaka? Sorry, having trouble remembering names. Bug Zapper or Beauty. She was just really fun to watch do stuff. The way she thinks, the way she acts, the way the anime looks at it. I thought it was all very entertaining, and the overall plot that developed kind of felt relevant. Like, it kind of has this underlying social commentary to it that it's not trying to hide or make subtle, but at the same time it didn't feel like it was trying to force it in my face. And just an enjoyable show. I especially like the way how a certain magical index is about whatever the main character is in Index. I can remember Index's name because it's in the title. I think that was her name. But you know, Railgun of course was a recurring character, central character there. And in Railgun, it's almost like it just swapped around, so it works out pretty well to have this meshing of characters between the two, in my opinion. And that was one thing I really appreciated about watching Railgun, was just that it wasn't just, oh, it's only about Railgun. It's like, if it's going to be about Railgun, it's going to be about things relevant also to what we saw from a certain magical index. So, they're two very different stories. A certain magical index probably follows a much more closer, almost harem anime kind of setup, but maybe with not as blatant a harem, I guess. While you know, a certain scientific railgun was just your school drama thing. Well, I go on, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. I think more of it has come out or is coming out in Japan or something, which means more will hopefully come out here because Funimation will bring it to us. Let's see. I also watched the first half of Hanasaku Iroha, you know, what I showed on camera just a little bit ago. And it was pretty entertaining. I want to watch more, but there's also some parts of it that really pissed me off. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how else to put this other than our main character's family seems to have an inherited genetic defect of being intolerable cunts, but also just kind of having this sweet side kind of shine through. And our main character only seems like she's maybe not a bad person only because she hasn't reached some sort of critical threshold in growing up. Because even during the course of the anime, she kind of realizes that there are things she's done that are very selfish of her in terms of not realizing what she's doing to other people. And this is just like the things that do happen where she might realize that, but kind of in a bigger context, I guess. And her grandmother's just a bitch because she thinks slapping people is a acceptable way of dealing with any problem that makes you upset enough, and her mother's just a lying cunt. Yeah. And there's other unpleasant situations there, but the anime somehow doesn't completely drive me away from wanting to watch it. I mean, Peach Girl, every character in that anime made me want to scream. I only made a couple of episodes in that and stopped for my own health, because I probably would have, I don't know, suffered some sort of heart attack just watching it. And this kind of almost seemed like some of the characters could be something, but they're not. And that's probably what made it tolerable in that respect. And then other than that, there are things that happened where it's like, even though I don't entirely trust certain characters, I feel sympathy for what's happening to them, why it's happening, and maybe why they feel that way. So it's a very strange anime. I don't really know what to say about it overall, other than it sometimes made me feel kind of like I was watching a good potential tearjerker for a character I was kind of angry at, maybe. The other interesting thing is, according to MyAnimeList.net, it's seinen, which would indicate that it was for an older male audience, but I couldn't help but notice that if you were to try and describe kind of what the anime does, which is about how this girl has to get used to her new lifestyle and also juggle this fact that she has an unknown relationship that almost developed and that is now having to deal with from a distance. I don't know. It would almost sound more like you were talking about either a shoujo or a josei or something like that, which is kind of interesting. It makes me wonder, you know, how we kind of have these stereotypical ideas, but at the same time, it's kind of silly to assume that just because we associate certain ideas, such as this overarching how do we deal with love, that the primary audience couldn't be men. And I think we've got examples of that all across the board that even go other directions or even break other boundaries. For example, Puella Magi Madoka Magica and Magical Girl Lyrical Nonoha probably being intended for an older male audience as opposed to a younger female audience. You know, strange things like that. Chobits kind of reminds me of that, which makes me think that a lot of clamp stuff can be sort of like that as well. So it's very interesting. That's more of a self-reflection on society sort of thing. Anyways, all that aside, the other two things I watched was I rewatched Vampire Hunter D. And Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, of course. And the order that those were rewatched in was Bloodlust first and then the older Vampire Hunter D. And part of the reason was the person I was watching it with, it was a suggestion for him so that somebody else had recommended Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust to him. And he probably had trouble keeping track, but I knew that the person that recommended something to him recommended Bloodlust. And it was really interesting watching it now versus previous times, because while watching it, I sort of realized it's kind of like the Ninja Scroll for vampire anime. I mean, there's this kind of interesting story underneath the covers, underneath the visual effects, I guess, would be better to say. But the visual effects are there to just kind of make you really appreciate the fact that animated stuff just has this strong suit to it. Like, you might not be able to make something like Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust work unless you were doing mostly animation. I mean, CGI, adding CGI to movies, to a certain extent, we get really close to animation there, because the power of animation is the ability to create something from nothing, basically, instead of trying to figure out how to create that something from almost something like that. I mean, I was just watching a Plinkett review of Titanic, and they, like, built a life-size Titanic set, or something like that. I don't know how true that is. I take Plinkett thing with a grain of salt because it's comedy, but there's a possibility that that's the way it would have actually been done, and so I could probably accept the fact that maybe that's what happened, and, you know, that's a kind of example of, instead of creating a CGI Titanic, you know, you would create something that, with the right feeling of dimensions and layout and whatever, by building the actual thing. And Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust just has a lot of visual elements to it that really draw you in, because they work because of they're animated. I'm not quite sure how convincingly they could be non-animated. And then beyond that, like I said, there's that interesting, thought-provoking story that it's developed around. There are some problems with it. I think there's a villain it introduces at the very end where the villain is introduced at the very end, almost just before we actually get to experience the villain for the first time. So there isn't an appropriate build-up for feeling the threat of the villain. And that's maybe a storytelling issue with it, but beyond that, Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, it was actually very fun to rewatch it. And then you got the older Vampire Hunter D anime, the one made in the 1985. So there's a 15-year difference between the two of them. And that one's not bad, it's just not Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust good. I mean, watching it feels like a very 80s anime. If I were to give it any real criticism as to why it wasn't so successful as Bloodlust, it would be the very obvious. It just doesn't have the focus of what it wants to be quite like Bloodlust does. Like, it's stuck with these 80s anime stereotypes that it's working with, and it wants D to be a couple of different kind of cool guys, and so it tries a little too hard to do it, and it's not entirely sure how it wants to kind of present all of these ideas, I guess. And a lot of that got really cleaned up with Bloodlust, and they tell two very different stories, and if there's any reason to watch one over the other, it's because there's one line in Bloodlust that's kind of mentioned really quickly that you don't necessarily pick up on, that is more explicitly expressed in the older Vampire Hunter D. But other than that, you still end up in the situation where you have the character D introduced, and he's mysterious, and they build up your understanding of who that character is, what he does, and maybe some ideas on why he does that, but never explicitly saying that because he's a mysterious character. And the action that takes place while that happens. Well, that's that. Other than that, let's see. I guess the only important things I can think of would be non-anime things, simple things like watching Die Hard and realizing maybe I hadn't seen the opening to that one in a long time. So maybe all my watchings of Die Hard were channel flipping. The parents were channel flipping, and they're like, "That's Die Hard." Oh, let's watch Die Hard. And so it was already in progress. So I probably didn't get to see the way that built up a whole lot. But it was a good movie to rewatch, and Majora's Mask is not freaking me out completely, but I did have a kind of disturbing dream a couple of nights ago about somebody breaking into a house I had just moved into and stealing some of my anime DVDs, and I kept using the Ocarina of Time to go back in time to try and change it. You can't fix everything by turning back time with the Ocarina. So, fun stuff. Any interesting things to mention about upcoming whatnots? I guess it's May. Nothing super noteworthy that immediately comes to mind, although I did notice that My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 2 is coming out on DVD apparently, and so I pre-ordered that. Well, that's good. And in June, Adventure Time Season 2, and in July, Legend of Korra. It's turning out to be a nice couple of months coming up for those non-anime things. For anime, I just can't remember. There's always interesting things in a month's orders. Today's, I haven't watched any Hakuoki, so I'm not super interested in that. I am curious about NIS releases, of course, but watching more Naruto Shippuden is definitely an important highlight for the month. And I think there's One Piece next week, so that's good. Or not next week, but next month. Or maybe I did say next month, or whatever. I'll just end this video. Shout out to people watching me. That would probably primarily be Charles and the Amazing Asshole. But if Death Mites, Oz Shadow, or the Fat Kid for Life are also around, then hey yo. And y'all, have a nice week.